Gentlemen, welcome to the Abington Heights regular school board meeting of July 20th, 2022. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mrs. O'Day, roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Here.
Mr. Azar?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mrs. Henderson?
Here.
Oh, okay. Mrs. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Medensky?
Here.
Mr. Robeson?
Here.
Mrs. Tierney?
Here.
Mr. Acker?
Here.
All present.
Can I have a motion? Can I have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of June 22nd?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Are there any board reports?
Yes. The Facilities Committee met last week on the 13th to complete the final assessment of the remaining two firms in the district-wide facilities study. And after a lot of time and analysis by committee members and the administration over the last several months, we've decided to bring before the board a recommendation which will appear on tonight's agenda.
Great, thank you. And I want to commend you guys for a lot of hard work. I know you were receiving volumes, not
Well,
proposals, and you did a great job, so
well,
thank you.
let me call out the folks on the committee then. Of course, Anthony Abdallah, Rod Azar, Mickey Tierney, and Jim Marabelli and Chris Schaefer. It was very good, and we really did a lot of thinking and talking about the future.
Great, well, thank you very much. Okay, any other board reports? I would like to report that the board had a board retreat on July 14th where we met and basically talked about each other. I think it was very productive, and I think everyone got a lot out of it. So, we do not have student representatives. Obviously, it's the middle of the summer, so the next part of the meeting will be the superintendent's report. So, Dr. Schaefer, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay out there? I just wanted to piggyback a little bit and speak briefly about the moving forward in asking the board to consider KCBA for the district-wide facility study. One of the many aspects that attracted us to KCBA was the time that they spent thoughtfully discussing not only the facilities, the operational side, but the educational component. And knowing that our buildings, our 6 facilities that we'll take a look at, serve our students and our families. And special emphasis was put on discussing the functionality of our buildings relative to the needs of our students, the needs of our teachers, and their needs of our community. In addition, I thought that it was very timely because I had many conversations with parents about some of the traffic circulation congestion issues at some of our schools, and that will be part of the study. I would submit to you that oftentimes when we think of school safety, we think about the inside of the building. But if you visit any of our schools in the morning and you see the amount of cars coming in, buses coming in, student safety, family safety, teacher safety is on display, and all the risks that we may see when you have an increased number of cars, buses, vans, students, and family members. So we are glad to see that KCBA will be doing a circulation study for us so we could take a look at the exterior safety and circulation immediately. And that's all I had to add to that.
That's all?
That's it.
Wow.
It is July.
Okay. The next part of our meeting is for public participation. We ask that you submit a card, and they're limited to 3 minutes, please. We have 2 cards so far. The first is John Ritchie from South Abington Township.
Good evening, everyone. I live in South Abington Township, but I also am the administrator at Hillside Haven Church. It's the property that's just down the hill from the high school, so we're on Noble Road. So I'm here on behalf of the church. I also want to start off and say I've never been to a meeting like this before, and it's very possible that this is an issue that's already been addressed or talked about or dealt with or whatever, so I apologize if I'm ignorant of anything that's already happened or been decided and such. There's a drainage pipe that comes out of the high school property. It discharges roughly in the direction of our property, but essentially the water all goes onto Noble Road. Obviously Noble Road is a hill, and so what happens is in the spring, summer, fall, big rainstorm, lots of water comes off of the high school property onto Noble Road. We have an upper parking lot, a lower parking lot. Both of those parking lots, the entrances are getting eroded essentially by that water runoff. Down the hill from us, there's also some business offices. Their entrance also gets some damage, and then there's a development either farther down the road than them, and they also receive debris and damage from the water runoff. In the winter, as you can imagine, that also freezes up. So there are times in the winter where literally the whole lane of Noble Road, not top to bottom, but width-wise, the width of the lane is covered in ice. And I know, I've spoken to the township, I know the township gets called out to salt that, obviously for safety purposes. And I think for safety purposes, they're more than happy to salt it, but I think if you were to ask them, salting it is deteriorating the road because they salt that ice melts, the water goes into the cracks of the blacktop, and then it freezes and it pops the blacktop. And so Noble Road, I think, is suffering some damage because of that water. I've talked to the township. Obviously I don't, this would be hearsay because I don't want to speak on their behalf. I guess they just directed me to talk to someone at the school. And so if I don't know who's liable or responsible or anything, we're happy to be a part of the solution. We just want to know if there's anything that's been talked about. Again, I'm ignorant of anything that may have already been talked about or discussed or decided. And if you don't have an answer, that's fine. I just wanted to come and make a comment. And if you do have an answer, great, but that's my comment.
Thank you, and Jim has a response for you.
Okay.
So
It's an issue that has come up in the past,
Sure.
and an issue we had looked at and discussed with the township in the past. I believe we had a civil engineer come look at it. I'll have to go review the notes. I had a voicemail forwarded to me, I believe, from you, and so I do owe you a call back.
Yeah.
So let me circle back on that because it's been a number of years, and then we could have a conversation. Sure. And visit the site.
Sure, I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jack Farron from Clark Summit.
Hello, my name is Jack Farrell. I am the president of the Abington Heights class of 2025. I'm a member of the cross-country, track, and basketball teams, and I'm a participant of many clubs at the high school. I just want to start by thanking all of you for allowing me to speak in front of you today. The reason I am here is to inform everyone of a charity 5K run race that I am organizing for early September. My goal is to do everything in my power to create a positive impact in my class and in our community. So, this 5K will be in support of the Susan Burke Foundation of Colon Cancer, where the proceeds will be given directly to the foundation. Susan Burke tragically lost her life to a battle with cancer this past weekend. In her lifetime, Susan has touched many people's hearts and was a very key piece to both the Abington and Running communities. From being a motivating coach to a loving friend, Susan was always there for those who need her most. Susan always persevered and proved to be stronger than the storm. With the Burke family, Mr. Snyder, and the cross-country coach, Coach Bassetti, in support, this race will be no short of amazing. This run will take place on Labor Day, September 5th at the Abingtonites Middle School. More details will be released as the race approaches, so keep an eye out. We hope to see you there, and any donations to the race are greatly appreciated. Thanks, and spread the word.
Jack, is there information on where people can donate?
So we are working on setting up a page. It's going to be on the Run sign-up website, where you will be able to sign up for the race, and then hopefully be able to donate there.
Please make sure that the school community knows that.
All right, I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Jack, if you can, when you get all your promotional materials, you can send it to Dr. Vitale here, and we can give you her email. That way we can advertise it to all the teachers and staff that are coming in right before Labor Day, so they could have it in their hands.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, those are the only two cards we have. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, then let's move on to the action and discussion items. Dr. Schaefer, we'll put you back on.
All right, with the approval of the bills?
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the bills?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
So the board requests to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved. Second.
Wait.
Thank you. On the motion?
Oh.
We have to,
Yeah.
excuse me, Mr. Medensky, please go ahead and make the treasurer's report.
We started the month of June with $9,869,789. We had total monthly revenues of $3,797,470, which most of it was from the state subsidies that we have. And we only had net disbursements of $4,154,254, which leads us a cash balance going into July for $9,513,005.
Thank you very much, Mr. Medensky, and I certainly apologize. Now I'll ask for a motion to approve it.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker asks that the board consider for approval the personnel report, numbers 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Before moving on to item D, I would just like to recognize in attendance today Mr. Enrico Mastriani, our new athletic director. Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board request approval of the new story tuition agreements for students 9A, 10A, 11A.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar. Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider for approval the settlement agreement between Abington Heights School District and student 12A.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board to consider for approval the agreement between Abington Heights School District and Mice Hill Transitional Skills Center for special education services.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider for approval the opening of bids received for copier paper.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
I'll add that this motion was made necessary by inflationary pressures on copy paper. We've never exceeded the bid threshold when in purchasing copy paper, but the market is way up. So we've had to go, we're over a $20,000 bid threshold, so we have to market it to the public in this manner.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider for approval the following Abington Heights School District job descriptions, numbers 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Azar, Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider for approval the July volunteer list.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Medensky,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar, Mr. Acker,
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the proposal between Abington Heights School District and KCBA to perform a district-wide facility study as contained in item 12.
So moved.
Second. On the motion?
I do have a question. Dr. Schaefer, when do you think they'll get started?
Immediately. We've already had some discussions about a timeline and coming out at the end of July, early August to meet with the administrators and do a preliminary 2-day walkthrough of all buildings.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar? Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
All right, you're back on in public.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was that Calypso music?
Yes, it was. It's very embarrassing. After probably 15 years, we still haven't changed it. Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the contract with PSBA for policy revisions as contained in item 13.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar? Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Actually, Dr. Schaefer, I was thinking that that was Mrs. Henderson's music in the background, so not the school district.
We will blame it on her.
Yes.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider for approval the tuition reimbursement report, item number 14.
So moved. Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar? Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the agreement between Abington Heights School District and the Diligent Corporation for the implementation of Board Docs LT Plus as contained in item 15.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
Mr. Acker, just a comment on this. This is very consistent with, approving this is consistent with what we're trying to do with the website. And so this will work very nicely. It's very scalable. That really digitizes things like agendas, minutes, but also policies. So I was looking at the different packages, and I think this is the one that works. So this is a good thing.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar? Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, any new informational for the board this time? Any new business? I do have one item. July 20th happens to be Moon Day. I don't know if you know that. It is Moon Day. It is also Mrs. Karam's birthday. And, we had hoped to have the board barbershop quartet with Mr. Fleming, Mr. Medensky, Mr. Dola, and Mr. Robeson sing happy birthday to you, but I understand the uniforms are at the cleaners, so. But anyway, happy 29th birthday. With that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And happy birthday, Emily.
That's when the Apollo astronauts touched down on the moon. 1969.
That's awesome.
Very different than last year.